Hey everyone, today we're going to try and beat XCOM 2 with only the WotC Technical class. 2 years ago I made a Christmas special video where we used a stupid amount of grenades to beat this game, and I figured today's challenge run would be the perfect opportunity for Santa to make his return to the channel. And why this run in particular? Well, allow me to show you what Technicals can do.
Fire and rocket!
Yeah, these Technicals are pretty good at blowing stuff up. So Santa is back to blow some Advent clowns sky high and make sure the rest of us enjoy the holiday season. Now, before we cover the rules of today's run, I have a super quick announcement that I want to make. I've made part 2 of the Drifters Broadcast Community Character Pool available. Try saying that one 10 times fast. Downloading this file will allow you to add a bunch of characters who have appeared in my videos into your own game, so you can command them on the battlefield yourself. I released the first character pool ages ago, I think it was a couple of years, but part 2 includes some highly desirable soldiers, such as the living legend himself, Liam Neeson. There's also Abomination and a whole bunch of others. The link is in the description, so feel free to download that one if you're interested, and I hope that you can have some fun with it. I think it will only work with the PC version of the game though, so sorry console bros, I can't help you out here. And with that out of the way, let's quickly cover the rules and then we're going to jump into the run. We're playing on Commander difficulty. We're playing on Honest Man, so we only reload in the events of misclicks, glitches, and shenanigans. We're only using the WotC Technical class in combat. And a very special rule for this one, everyone's got to wear a Santa hat. It's that time of year. Alright, so like most of the WotC classes, the Technicals can equip a rifle, a shotgun, or an SMG as their primary weapon. But what's perhaps more interesting with these guys is their secondary weapon, the Gauntlet. It has one use of an exosuit-style rocket and 2 uses of a flamethrower. Now the rocket isn't as good as the exosuit version, it does less damage with a range of 2 to 4 HP, and even worse than that, it has a chance to scatter. I really dislike the scatter mechanic, and I was hoping that it wasn't going to be included in this mod that ports the Long War classes to the vanilla game, but no such luck. Scatter is indeed on the menu, and I will have a side of salt to go with it. Now the way scatter works is that basically your rockets aren't guaranteed to land where you want them to. They can scatter a little bit. And it's annoying since it not only means that the rocket can miss the enemies that we're aiming at, it also means that it can scatter into things that we don't want to hit, like our own troops, objectives that we need to protect, or even civilians on retaliation missions. Now we can reduce the amount of scatter by using the rocket as our first action of the turn, but that will only reduce, it will not remove. So we are going to have to deal with scatter, and it is going to be annoying. The flamethrowers, on the other hand, thankfully don't scatter, but their range is much more limited. And between the scattering of the rockets and the limited range of the flamers, often these Technicals are left to use only their gun. And their aim kind of sucks, so you don't really want to use the gun. All of these things combined lead to the first mission taking 3 attempts. I remember really liking this class when I played Long War 2 at release, but here they're kind of seeming like they're gonna suck. Anyway, let's continue, see how we go. The first guerrilla op is a sewer mission, and while these are normally pretty bad early game, the tight spaces on the map actually lend themselves really well to the use of our flamethrower. It does 2 to 5 damage, plus it sets the target on fire, at least most of the time, so you'll probably get at least 1 point of burn damage on top of the base damage. And in this mission, I think we eliminate all but one of the enemies with flamethrowers. So that's seeming like a pretty big positive for the Technicals. They're actually good on sewer maps, and there's not too many classes who can say that. Mrs. Claus is our first corporal, and we have 3 ability trees as usual. First up is Rocketeer, which, as you probably would expect, it focuses on rocket abilities. The first skill is Fire in the Hole, which reduces the scatter of rockets. Very helpful. Then we've got the Trooper tree, which revolves around abilities with the primary weapon. First one we have is Suppression, which works the same as vanilla. But these guys can equip shotguns. Can you use suppressing fire with a shotgun? That would be weird. I mean, I'm not going to take this ability on anyone, so I guess we're not going to find out. Anyway, the final tree is Fireman, and that enhances the flamethrower. The first ability is Roust, which gives a longer, thinner use of the flamethrower that does less damage but forces the target to relocate. Now, initially my thinking was give the rocket-oriented troops Fire in the Hole and the flamethrower uses Roust. But as the run went on, I realised that was a mistake. The best strat here is just to give every corporal Fire in the Hole. We can come back for Roust later once the training centre is built if we want it, but right now reducing scatter on the rockets is just way too valuable to pass up on anyone. We have the Horde Council mission up next. Now, I hadn't played the game in a couple of months when I did this run, so I am a bit out of practice, and I end up running the troops in the complete wrong direction away from the VIP we need to rescue. Now, this results in, for what I think is the first time in my life, we actually run down the time limit in this mission. Now, I was curious to see what would happen, and the answer is not much. Apparently, the Lost are meant to start spawning every turn once the timer expires, but for whatever reason, that just does not happen here. The mission just continues as normal. Now, the Lost do still spawn in pretty regularly, maybe every second turn, but it honestly didn't seem like a big deal. Or at least that's what I thought to start with. I've equipped Drifter with an SMG for the movement bonus, and I've sent him out to grab the scientist. Both Drifty and the VIP climb onto the warehouse roof. We stand at the guttering leading up to us to block off the Lost's access. Now, this is a usual strat that I use in these videos, but after doing this I make a huge misplay. We use Juke to blow up a hallway in the building that the rest of the squad is occupying. Now, the reason we do this is that it cuts off the Lost's access to the squad. That means they're safe and sound while they lend support to Drifter and the VIP. The problem here is that using the grenade summons in more Lost, and a bunch of them are dashes that run up right onto the rooftop with Drifter and the VIP. So this could end very, very badly. Now, the VIP does get hit, but he thankfully only takes a single point of damage. And as far as Drifter goes, well, the good news is the Lost misses its attack on him. The bad news is that it misses because it hits the floor underneath Drifter instead. So our boy goes plummeting to the earth below and succumbs to the fall damage. Once again, Drifter has perished in one of our solo class runs. This man is truly cursed. So this leaves the VIP to frantically run as fast as he possibly can to avoid the same fate. I place him on a shipping container to try the same strat as previous, stand on an elevated position and block the way up. Sadly, the container has 2 ways up and we can only block one of them. So our boy comes face to face with a zombie, not to mention there's a legion of them surrounding the container. This isn't looking good. So it's up to our soldiers Juke and Headbanger to thin the Lost's ranks and hopefully keep our VIP friend alive. Let's see how that goes. We begin with Headbanger missing a 90% shot, then Juke immediately misses an 89% shot on the same Lost. Yeah, I'm not liking our scientist bro's chances here. So we just move him as far as we can, and to my genuine surprise, he does survive. Now, he does take some more damage, but not enough to finish him. And then on the next turn, he can finally reach the building the rest of the troops are occupying, and once he's here, we're pretty much safe at that point. We can grenade all the paths up to us, and the Lost aren't a problem anymore. So even though we did win, this was a pretty terrible outing, to be honest. We lost a soldier and came very close to losing the VIP as well. And I have to be honest, I attribute this lackluster showing mostly to me, not the troops. I messed up a few times here, and that made the mission more difficult than it needed to be. And I'm actually messing up on the strategic layer too. The research for magnetic weapons was inspired, so I opted to take it, but this is actually pointless. Completing the research early usually doesn't help since we probably won't have enough alloys to actually build the weapons until after the first supply raid. So there's really not much point researching this stuff early. Then it's time for the retaliation mission and we're facing off against the assassin. Her strengths are Watchful and Soul Stealer, which are honestly both pretty horrendous. But her weakness is the thing that we're really interested in, Shell-Shocked, and that is going to be perfect for us. On the first pod here, we actually eliminate the Priest with Roust, so it's not a bad ability, it gives us a small amount of guaranteed damage, it's just not as good as Fire in the Hole. Now Lady Dreadlock engages us before we finish dealing with the next pod. I decide we're going to ignore her for now and eliminate the lesser opponents first. And that ends up being pretty easy as we cook this last sectoid with a flamethrower. Nightmare is down to 2 out of 5 HP, and I could heal her since Mrs. Claus has the medikit, but I opt not to. We're just going to focus on the assassin instead. Now this is a risky play, but who's to say someone else won't get one-shot crit from the assassin and will need the medikit to prevent them from bleeding out on us. So I think keeping that resource is the best play. Now it does end up backfiring as the assassin comes back for Nightmare a couple of turns later and sends her into bleed out. Then we get hit with a harbour wave which dazes Santa. Then the assassin runs into full cover and goes on Overwatch. So just to recap her turn there, she got 2 sets of movement, 2 attacks, and an Overwatch in 1 turn. This chick just got more actions than we have soldiers. So at this point, it's looking like a bit of a mismatch for us. Mrs. Claus eats the Overwatch, and this is really bad. Every time we take damage, Soul Stealer is replenishing the assassin's HP. At one point we had her down to 10, but now she's back to 17, almost maximum. So I decide we're going to ignore both Nightmare and Santa. They need to fend for themselves. If the assassin interrogates Santa and then evacs out, that's probably the best case scenario at this point, because we are getting stomped. Now, I would try to evac ourselves, but there's no way we can reach both of our downed soldiers and reach an evac zone all in the 1 turn. So we're stuck here for the turn, we might as well fight. Maybe we'll get a Christmas miracle. And you know what? That's exactly what happens. Instead of running straight to Santa to grab him, the assassin takes the scenic route. She jumps up on the roof above Santa instead of just running straight to his floor. Now it may be because she was on fire, maybe burning disables her ability to interrogate soldiers, I'm not actually sure. But either way, this is perfect. We now have a clear shot with Robal's rocket, it'll inflict big damage, plus we'll score some fall damage when we destroy the roof. Wait, what's this? Friendly fire? There's literally no one around her. Unless the game is referring to Santa on the floor below, is the blast radius of this rocket really that big? So this isn't ideal, but Nightmare is about to be Shadow Realmed any moment, and this may be the only chance we have to finish this gangly samurai wannabe off. Hey, I just thought of something. Maybe we should start calling the assassin Yasuke. Anyway, in a move that is as cold as the North Pole, I decide risking Santa's life is worth it. So we launch that missile straight into the assassin's oversized forehead, and we send her crying back to the elders. Now thankfully the rocket doesn't hit Santa, but he actually takes fall damage of all things. The rocket above him somehow didn't hit him, but it did cause the floor beneath him to collapse. I mean, that's some environmental damage, alright. Anyway, Mrs. Claus can finally stabilise Nightmare, and all we've got left to deal with is a single Faceless. Now Flashbang will keep it at bay until we're ready to finish it off. And something really weird is going on with Santa after that fall. All his animations have frozen. Now we can still perform all his normal actions. When he moves, he just teleports from one spot to the next. When he shoots, the damage just instantly appears on the health bar of the Faceless. Really bizarre behaviour, but nothing game-breaking, and I actually kind of like it since it speeds up the gameplay. But regardless, against all odds, we have somehow emerged victorious with no losses, and I'm honestly surprised given how difficult that engagement was. And then this guerrilla op. This one was incredibly frustrating. We're up on the roof of this building and I want to drop a rocket on this pod of a Lancer and Captain, but they just keep patrolling away from us, until eventually we lose sight of them altogether. Then there's a second pod that I want to drop a rocket on, but they're too close to the truck with the objective that we need to hack. So we risk the truck being blown up if the rocket scatters, which I have no doubt it will. Meanwhile, the flamethrowers aren't too good for activating pods unless the bad guys patrol towards your position. But if we're the ones moving up on them, we're not going to be able to get close enough to make the flamer work too well before we get spotted and lose concealment. So all of this leads to us having only one option to start the fight: shooting. Also, did I mention most of our troops aren't in cover on this garbage rooftop? Now I will admit, it's certainly not ideal, and yes, I could have dropped down and engaged on the street or the bottom floor of the building. The problem with that is that 1, we risk activating another pod. I know that original one is still close by. And 2, we lose the height advantage, so our shots are a lot less likely to hit. Now we're running out of time to hack this objective, so we need a decisive victory here. We don't have time to be engaged in a long drawn out firefight. Our troops need to hit these clowns hard, take them out quickly, and then push on. Sadly, we do not get a decisive victory. We're not able to down the sectoid or the trooper in one turn. So instead I opt for a flashbang, and I'm hoping that will cause these guys to miss with their attacks.
Down one! Tell my kids tight. They're gone!
Yep, 2 one-shot crits. Through disorientation. That's XCOM, baby. So we send these 2 douche nozzles to their well-deserved graves, and I was very salty here. And then on the enemy turn, that pod from earlier does indeed activate. Now we're running out of time, and the dark event is a bad one, so I just charge Coffee Man towards the objective. Even if we lose him, if he can hack that device, I think it'll be worth it. But by moving forward, we activate yet another pod. And that leaves us with 4 enemies versus our 2 soldiers. So this one's pretty much over. I throw down an evac zone, but before Headbanger exits, he launches a rocket at the Lancer. I still want to reach the objective with Coffee, so Headbanger is just giving our man as much of a chance of surviving as possible. Of course, the rocket scatters and does 0 damage on the Lancer. Cool, thanks Headbanger, that's really helpful. So Coffee Man ends up disoriented, so he's not hacking anything. We are losing this mission, and he can't even make it to the evac zone. I really should have placed it closer to him. So given that we cannot hack the objective, we cannot run away, instead I just go for the tried and true method of cowering in fear. Yeah, we're just going to hunker down into the fetal position and hope we somehow survive. Which we actually do. Now I didn't expect that. However, to my chagrin, disorientation lasts 2 turns. I either didn't know that or I had forgotten. Probably the latter. So even though the truck blows up, which in theory is actually good for us, it means we can run straight over it to reach the evac instead of having to take the longer path around it. The problem is, when disoriented, Coffee still cannot make it there in 1 turn. So it's the fetal position once more. This time we're doing it literally at this captain's feet. This is a horrendously pathetic display. Coffee, I am so sorry for this. But you want to know something? It actually works. Against all odds, Coffee survives a 2nd turn of attacks from 5 enemies. Yeah, there's 5 now. The sectoid raised the zombie. And this is honestly absurd. This man has no right to still be breathing. And one of the things working in our favour is that Advent doesn't actually get an aim bonus based on proximity. So being right next to the captain doesn't actually matter beyond being flanked. And then on our turn, the disorientation is finally gone and it all comes down to this moment. Coffee needs to dash to the evac zone and there's 2 enemies on Overwatch. Our hunker down isn't going to protect us here. Can this man make it out alive? Oh my goodness, the coffee man has done it. Somehow he has survived this hellscape. It seems it's another Christmas miracle. This man looked the Shadow Realm dead in the eyes and simply said, "Not today." Now, while that was an utterly disastrous outing, it has given us our first sergeant. We have Bigger Booms, which grants our rockets a 20% chance to crit for +2 damage. Fortify, which is a free action that grants +20 defense, and Napalm X, which gives the flamethrower a chance to panic enemies. Doesn't say what the chance is though. Is it less than 20%? I bet it is. To be honest, it probably factors in the enemy's will score, so it can't give a direct number. But I'm betting the number isn't very high. And also, Headbanger here has picked up Death from Above that we're going to be able to unlock once we have the training center. This will be really helpful. We must keep this man alive at all costs. And now, for some nonsense. We have a supply raid and this group of Advent goons emerges from the darkness. Now, upon being activated, the captain marks Lady Claus and one of the troopers shoots at her, taking away 3 HP. Now, I complained in a recent video, I think it was the Zombies run, about the counterattack dark event. The same thing happened back then. A unit activated and instead of overwatching like the dark event is supposed to make it do, it just got a free attack on the mimic beacon that we had deployed. Now at that time I theorised that maybe the beacon was overriding the overwatch and forcing the Advent unit to attack, but after doing some more research I've discovered that no, it has nothing to do with mimic beacons. This dark event is simply broken. It's supposed to only allow Overwatch shots, but it doesn't work correctly, and the Advent units can and do use that Overwatch action to perform other attacks. It is absolutely cringe. So in the future, if I do lose any soldiers because of this garbage, I'll most likely be reloading the turn. For right now though, after how frustrating the last couple of missions have been, I am in absolutely no mood for this game's nonsense. And I just start lobbing rocket after rocket after rocket at these troglodytes. Even after the first 2 scatter to the right and the left of the captain, avoiding him completely, I simply do not care. If those rockets are gonna scatter, we'll just fire more rockets. We'll fire as many rockets as it takes to turn every last one of the 3 stooges here into dust. And all up, it takes 4. Well, 4 plus 1 grenade. At least we don't have to worry about those things scattering. And it was in this moment of seething rage that I realised every soldier needs to have fire in the hole. Rockets are going to be our go-to when things get rough and we need to make a final stand, so minimising scatter is a must-have. As we proceed, we take it slow and steady, overwatching as we go, and this leads to us missing out on a few loot crates, not to mention the ones we've blown up, but I'm prioritising keeping our soldiers alive over gathering resources. Then on the last pod, we get even more jank. Look at this rocket. It's our last one and it goes straight into both the Lancer and Purifier. It literally damages both of them. But somehow the Purifier's cover is still there. It shouldn't be there since the entire barrier was turned into rubble. But this guy doesn't care, he's now just hiding behind a literal invisible wall. And of course that's reducing our chance to hit him with our guns. Now we do still win, but certainly a very frustrating outing here. Between the soldiers getting to attack when they shouldn't, and the cover existing when it shouldn't, the game is handicapping us because it doesn't work properly, and that always gets under my skin. Alright, so next up we have the council mission in the sewer where we have to hold off Advent reinforcements. Now given that the last few missions have been kind of difficult, I'm expecting this one to go quite badly if I'm being honest. So I adopt a strategy we've used a few times in the past. We're sending in the self-deletion squad. And I'm not giving them any items like medikits or flashbangs since I don't expect them to return. This is probably going to be a one-way trip. I do, however, give them all magnetic shotguns. We've been able to build those after that supply raid, and I figure in the tight quarters of the sewers, shotguns should be useful. We're most likely going to be fighting in
close range.
On top of that, shotguns do more damage than the rifles. And given all these guys are squaddies, so their rockets are going to have maximum scatter, not to mention the fact that mechs are immune to fire, I'm thinking that being able to deal enough damage to just punch straight through the robot's armor may be exactly what we need. And on this mission, luck ends up being a determining factor. Like the enemy composition as an example, there's only one mech and no Vipers. That's way easier than the enemies you normally have to deal with on this one. So the game is being kind to us here. And then we have Plot Armor who makes a 58% shot and a 64% on his very next shot. This man is handing out one-shot crits like he was a shield bearer. Then once the reinforcements start dropping in, they're super close to us. That makes blasting them with our shotguns a pretty simple process. And so all of these things combined working in our favour, it not only results in our sacrificial lambs surviving the mission, they actually achieve a flawless victory. So the Suicide Squad has gone absolutely above and beyond here. Maybe I should have been using these guys the entire campaign. From a covert op, we have our first lieutenant. Our abilities are Concussion Rocket, which does less damage than a regular rocket, but it can stun or disorient organic enemies. It also leaves a cloud of smoke. Now I'm pretty sure the smoke appears around the person who fired it, not the enemies that it's fired at, because that would just be silly. Then we have Shredder, which is the same as Vanilla and always a welcome ability. And finally there's Burnout, which creates a cloud of smoke around the user every time they use the flamethrower. And the basic purpose of smoke in this game is that it increases your defense when you're standing in it. Then the next retaliation mission, and it's honestly a bit of a disaster. We get spawned on the far side of this gully, all the civilians and enemies are on the other side, and we're a really long distance away. And the problem here is that there's just no cover for us to use as we push up. It is just a wasteland. Plus, we can't really use the rockets since they'll hit the residents of the Haven. So using the rockets is out, but we're also too far away to make good use of the flamethrowers. And all these things combine making the exchange with the enemies take forever. We have to move slowly because our positioning is so limited, and we're not able to use some of our best attacks. And even though we survive the battle, Advent take down too many civilians and we lose the mission. This was honestly quite annoying. Similar to the sharpshooters, bad terrain can be a huge handicap on these technicals. I really don't think there's much we could have done here to win, short of sacrificing our soldiers, which I don't want to do. After this encounter, our boy Leeson gets abducted by the Warlock. We haven't even met the Warlock yet. This is just brutal. Now how this happened is that the Left Behind Dark event has activated, so our main man Leeson got grabbed during a covert op. And I guess it depends on which faction is running the op as to what chosen will kidnap your troops. I am hoping we get a chance to rescue Leeson later. I mean, what's Christmas without Leeson? Maybe don't answer that. Anyway, for right now, it's another guerrilla op. And we have both plated armor as well as tier 2 gauntlets. That means both our rockets and flamethrowers will be dealing more damage, and the power boost is really nice. We actually one-shot a captain with a flamethrower. It's a pretty glorious thing to see. Now the objective on this one is to wipe out the field commander, and the general strat is to spam him with rockets and flamethrowers until he meets his maker. It's not a sophisticated approach by any means, but it is an effective one. So things are going well. However, that quickly changes when we blue move into 2 pods, both sporting a muton each. Plus, there's a mech in there, just for good measure. Now, there's way too many enemies for us to deal with here, and we're running a little low on rockets. So I just decide we're gonna run away. It's time to evac out. We've already stopped the dark event by eliminating the commander, so escaping with our lives is the best bet. And just the timing of this, I just couldn't believe it. Mrs. Claus is the only one of our troops who is too far away from the evac to reach it this turn. Now initially I'm thinking if we hang back with her, perhaps she can stay out of the bad guy's line of sight and then evac next turn. But my good people, we don't even need to risk that. I literally bonded Mr. and Mrs. Claus just before deploying on this mission. I had been wanting to do it the entire run, but their compatibility was low, so I couldn't. I guess their marriage is going through some tough times or something. But yeah, this was the first mission where they were bonded. So St. Nicholas can give his lovely wife an extra action. That means that she can reach the evac this turn. This allows everyone to make it out immediately, safe and sound. Just amazing how well that timing worked out. I was really happy with this. Now after the mission, the signal jamming dark event does proc. This doubles our scanning times on the strategic layer. I really despise this. It's just annoying, but we'll try not to let it get in our way. Now soon we have a council mission and the assassin is here. And I had been planning to skulljack a captain on this mission. We're really behind on story progress and I've been waiting to pull the trigger on using the jack until we had access to blue screen rounds. I'm thinking they'll make the codexes easier to deal with. So I've been waiting a while to use this skulljack and I don't plan on letting the assassin's presence deter me. Plus, using the jack allows us to one-shot a captain, and they're arguably more dangerous than the codex anyway. Now, the problem with spawning in a codex is that 2 of our soldiers, Nightmare and Headbanger, they've been hit by an assassin's blinding grenade. Now, don't get me wrong, I would much rather the grenade than a harbour wave, so I'm fine with it. It just presents the problem that Headbanger's the one with the blue screen rounds and the high aim stat, and with his blindness, he cannot get line of sight on the codex. So what occurs next is perhaps one of the more ridiculous things I've done in the channel's history. See, the way that blindness works is that it limits your soldiers' line of sight distance. They will not be able to target an enemy with their gun unless they get in extremely
close range.
Now, if we can get the soldier in close enough, I don't think it actually affects their accuracy. They'll have the same chance to hit they always do. It's just that we're gonna have to be standing extremely close to the enemy to be able to select it as a target. So while that's interesting, doesn't really help us with our current scenario. But what does help us is that blindness does not affect rockets or other similar AoE abilities. They still have the same distance they always do. And so here, I'm trying to figure out where the Codex clone has gone and where I should send Nightmare's rocket. We can still fire that thing the full range, even if we can't see where it's going to land. Now this is quite a difficult process. I was hoping to get an outline of the terrain, then swap back to a soldier who has regular line of sight, work out where the Codex is in relation to that terrain, and that should allow me to determine where the rocket needs to go, even if Nightmare herself cannot see where it's going. The issue is that the blindness ability is really annoying. It doesn't really give us an outline of the terrain. It's just a dark screen with no detail whatsoever. Or at least that's how it seems initially. After a bunch of frenetic scrolling with the mouse, I catch a glimpse of a tree in the darkness. Just a single tree. Now it's not ideal as the Codex isn't actually that close to this object, but I figure it's the best we're gonna get. So I try to line up the rocket in the darkness as best I can, And look, I don't usually like to toot my own horn in these videos, I'm not a humble bragging kind of guy, but even I have to admit that I really knocked it out of the park with this one. So, there's the tree. I reckon like here somewhere. I'ma do it! If she gets it. Yes! Yes! You stupid Codex! Yeah, this was so great. I was so happy with myself. Completely ridiculous strat, but it worked perfectly. And as for the assassin herself, well, she still has her weakness to explosives, so she's actually pretty easy to deal with when we eventually set our sights on her. So a bit of a silly mission here, but a memorable one nonetheless. Before long, we have our first captain. Our abilities are Resilience, which reduces the enemy's chance to crit by 50%, Formidable, which gives us 2 shield points at the start of every mission, as well as a 50% reduction in damage from explosions. And finally, there's Phosphorus, which allows our flamethrower to damage mechanical units, as well as shredding armor. And honestly, all of these sound pretty decent. And even though having a captain allows us to purchase squad size 2, we actually don't have the money. So I end up selling a bunch of stuff to get the supplies to buy it. And I do this only to realise on the next mission, our barracks is extremely depleted in terms of will and injuries, and I only have 4 soldiers to send anyway. So a complete waste of money there. I could have purchased our first Mimic Beacon for the same amount of supplies. Instead, we now have a squad size upgrade that we cannot use, since there aren't enough soldiers available. So with our 4 troops, we send Santa climbing up to the area above us, where we find not only 2 pods in waiting, but also 2 turrets on the roof of the building that we need to reach to hack the objective. And not only that, but one of the pods was very close to the entranceway that we used to get up here, so we lose our concealment. Now I was worried at this point, but not overly so. My thinking is we can deal with the closest pod of a trooper and a captain, and then, as long as we drop back down to the lower area, we can break the enemy's line of sight. That will definitely protect us from the turrets, and hopefully it'll protect us from the other enemies too. At first the plan goes well, we do indeed take out the captain and trooper, so I'm thinking we should be okay. However, the assassin arrives, which I was ready for, but I had forgotten that Nightmare has fear of the Chosen, so she panics. Then one Viper poisons Coffee, and the next one pulls him onto the upper level and binds him. So this is really, really bad. Half our team now disabled. On top of that, the obvious issue of Coffee being poisoned, he's now down to 1 HP, so he needs to evac this turn no matter what. Quiet Paws and Santa will stay behind to try and protect Nightmare for a turn, and then we'll hopefully be able to get everyone out. But here I make a huge mistake. I'm really worried about Coffee and I want to get him out of here as quickly as possible, and in my haste, I forget that the turret has gone on Overwatch. And unlike last time, our man Coffee is not able to avoid the shot and he goes down. Really, really bad play from me. I should have run the Overwatch with Quiet Paws or Santa first and then let Coffee move safely. The other guys had full health, so they could have tanked the hit. It would have been so easy to save Coffee here, and I was really annoyed at myself for this blunder. And all I can really say is that when you're in the heat of the moment and the stress is rising, it's easy to make mistakes. And that's exactly what I did here. Because of that, it seems the legend of the Coffee Man has finally come to a close. And I can only blame myself. The assassin soon takes out Nightmare, but she only goes into Bleed Out, not the Shadow Realm. Anyway, at this point in time, the mission is well and truly a loss, so we grab Nightmare and we book it out. We weren't even able to grab Coffee's corpse, and that's honestly really annoying. He was carrying one of only 2 sets of blue screen rounds that we could afford to build. Plus, he also had a flashbang. So those items are gone, and we do not have the resources to build replacements. So yeah, pretty much all downhill after Nightmare panicked. Now, we were only rocking 4 soldiers, so I'm not too worried at this stage. But you want to know the thing that annoys me the most about this? The dark event that is triggered from this mission failure is Alien Infiltrator. That's the one that places Hidden Faceless on missions. Now, the dark event was hidden. If I had known that it was this event in particular, I would have just evac'd out straight away. This one is actually a decent one to get since it gives us access to faceless corpses, and they give us access to mine beacons. So we could have just bounced out of this mission instantly, not lost anyone, and potentially it would have given us an advantage for the future. So all of this was for nothing. It's so frustrating. Shortly after that, we've got a council mission, and we finally expanded to the Warlock's territory. It's taken a long time due to signal jamming, but his strengths are Shogun, kinetic plating, and regeneration. His weakness is brittle. Now, kinetic plating and regeneration are both pretty terrible, so this could be bad. Then one of the pods we activate moves into these fuel pumps, and that was their biggest mistake.
This one's for you.
Just look at the devastation we've left here. The mech wreckage can't even fall down into the fiery hellscape below. We whooped these guys so badly, they're defying gravity. And while these rockets can be very useful, like they were here, they're definitely a mixed blessing. Like after that, when we use one on the enemy, it scatters and blows up the Dark VIP into smithereens. So we're not going to be getting the intel bonus for capturing that guy alive. Now, it's not a big deal, but it does highlight the imperfection in this weapon. Now, the Warlock does take a few turns to dispose of, mainly because some reinforcements drop down right next to him and act as his backup. And even though the fight is a bit annoying, it's not too difficult. We take him out fairly easily, and it definitely went better than our previous encounter with his sister. The battle gives us our first major. We have javelin rockets, which allow our rockets to go further beyond the soldier's line of sight. Then there's fire and steel. This one makes our gauntlet weapons and fires that they set do +1 damage. And there's also Incinerator, which increases the size of the flamethrower's AoE. And while all these abilities sound good, I'm even more excited about Headbanger's hidden skill, Chain Shot. I don't want to buy it just yet since it'll use up a lot of community AP, but in the future this should come in really helpful. Headbanger is rolling some great skills for us. We have a supply raid, and I decide to skulljack a codex and face off against the Avatar. The reason I'm doing this perhaps a bit early is that the money situation still sucks. And without being able to build radio towers, I'm concerned we may not have too many options with contacting other regions for facility and story missions. Now, we have got the black site, but I'd honestly rather fight an Avatar than the assassin. And the reason we're so impoverished is actually because we scored a lot of engineers early on. Now, that may sound like a weird thing to say, but hear me out. I really prioritised excavating the Avenger and building facilities. Now, the facilities have a regular upkeep cost, so the cash coming in at the council drops is pretty much non-existent. And so now we're in this situation where we need to contact more regions to get supplies, but we need supplies to contact more regions. It's a truly vicious cycle. So as we're battling the pod, I deliberately keep the codex that we encounter alive while we finish off the other enemies. Now, once we have the codex all on its own, I'm just about ready to use the skulljack, but of course, a brand new pod patrols into us. It's the exact same problem as the previous guerrilla op. Too many enemies activating in quick succession. So we can eliminate these new guys. We do have a full team this time, so that's certainly helping us. But once again, we want to leave the codex alive, and this allows it to teleport and hit a flanked shot on Headbanger. Now, we do have shield points, so even though the codex scores a crit, because of course it does, it still only inflicts 4 damage, so Headbanger is alive and well. Then we bring in the Avatar and we use the Frost Bomb to keep it from teleporting. And as much as I'd love to use Headbanger's rifle since he has the best aim, he's also the only one with a usable rocket, and we need to destroy the Avatar's cover. Once we do that, it's just a matter of hitting it with everything we have, and we hope that we can do enough damage. Now I use a flamethrower on the Avatar, and we get it down to 1 HP. Now for a regular enemy, the fire damage would finish it off on its turn, and this would be perfect. But of course, Avatars regain HP every turn, so this thing survives, and it's here I realise using the flamethrower was actually a terrible, terrible idea. Because it's burning, a lot of the Avatar's abilities cannot be used. So while it would normally go for mind control, which is actually good because it doesn't inflict any damage, well, it can't do that. The only attack that it can make is to shoot, which it does, at Headbanger. And just like that, we've lost our most powerful soldier. So naturally, I'm pretty horrified at this turn of events. But once we're in control again, Roble can get our revenge and blast the Avatar into dirt. So that's something. I mean, it's not much. Losing Headbanger is a huge blow to our strength on the tactical layer, but it is still something, so I guess I'm just gonna have to take it. We push on and encounter the final pod of 3 codexes. So we could have just finished that first one off and skulljacked one of these guys instead. And if we had done that, Headbanger would probably still be alive. And this honestly hurt my soul. Like the game is just rubbing my face in it at this point. And you want to know what's even better? Headbanger had our final set of blue screen rounds, so we have to take these 3 scumbags on with regular ammunition. And given we're usually doing around 6 damage, we naturally find ourselves dealing with quite a few clones. This all leads to Mr. Sneckhug getting Shadow Realmed as well. Now despite the loss, we still win the battle, and I could have evac'd out when I saw the pod of all codexes, and that would have been a sensible option. I just didn't want to leave all of Headbanger's gear behind, and honestly I think trading a soldier for the gear was the correct choice. Sneckhug was a lower level, he wasn't one of our strongest troops. Now Quiet Paws also has Death from Above, so I equip Headbanger's rifle on him. It has an advanced scope and it's easily the best weapon we have access to. So Quiet Paws, it's up to you now, buddy. And I christened the rifle the Banger in memory of its former wielder. And it really cracked me up when I gave it this name as well. What can I say? I have the sense of humour of a 12-year-old, and I make no apologies for that. Also, you might notice some soldiers aren't wearing Santa hats. They're new recruits we've trained up to try and backfill our losses, so once I remember to equip the hats, these guys will be joining in the festivities as well. Assuming they live that long, of course. And this next mission, this one is pretty garbage. We start a fair distance away from the objective, so we need to move pretty quickly. And once we arrive there, it's 3 pods right on top of each other. Essentially, there's 4 entrances to the room with the transmitter that we need to destroy, and 3 out of those 4 entrances have pods in them. So once you enter that room, everything is triggering all at the same time. And we end up with a similar problem we've had before. I'd like to just destroy the objective and bounce, but Metla has been cloned by a Spectre. Now I don't want to leave him behind, so we're gonna have to dig in for at least one more turn. And while we are able to save Metla, we end up losing Ox Error. Now Metla is a corporal, while Ox is a lieutenant. So this was an absolutely dreadful trade. I would have been better off just evacing out. Now we do destroy the beacon and then we're able to leave, so we have at least stopped the dark event, but every mission just seems to be going sideways. This is not good. Afterwards we complete research for powered armor, but of course we have no supplies to build the armor. Now we pay a visit to the black market and I sell a bunch of stuff, and I usually like to keep at least one of each corpse, since researching it always is a good thing to do. Even if we don't plan on making use of the researched items, it still gives a chance for a breakthrough to occur. But here, I'm just selling whatever I can. We need to get 240 supplies to afford this armor. That's a lot. Now, I avoid purchasing any supplies with intel since we're going to need that resource to continue expanding to new regions. And ultimately, getting those regions is the only thing that's going to solve our financial woes long term. So we have our 300 supplies, and I'm super happy that we can build our powered armor until I see... Yeah, now we don't have enough alloys. See, I sold a bunch of alloys for supplies, so I end up having to go back to the black market and I have to purchase alloys with intel anyway, so I should have just started by purchasing the supplies to begin with. But hey, you can't change the past. Unless you save scum, I guess, then you could, but we're not going to do that. Now this was a silly mistake, no doubt, and the truth is, at this point in the game, I was really frustrated. I left this class for last because I thought it would be fun, but it hasn't been fun. It's been really difficult and really annoying. We've had garbage pod activations, one-shot crits, trash dark events, me making stupid decisions, and there's not one thing I can point to that is making this run so challenging. It's just little thing after little thing. And on their own, all of these things would be easy to overcome. But it's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. These little hindrances start piling on top of each other, and once you have enough of them, they really add up and they become a sizable problem. On top of this, I run into another problem that actually has nothing to do with the game. See, I live stream these runs on Twitch, and at the end of the second stream, I actually had to cancel it early because my internet pretty much soiled itself. That's Australia for you, I guess. So I come back the next week to start the third stream, and it was just a disaster. It took me about 40 minutes just to get the stream started because my internet wasn't working, my recording software wasn't working, and Steam wasn't working. And these were three completely unrelated problems, all just hitting me at the same time. Now, regular viewers will have seen some of the rotten luck I have when I'm playing this game, but I assure you I am just as unlucky in real life as well. If Fallout special stats were a thing in reality, I would have rolled a 3 for luck at birth. So eventually I get the stream running, and after all the headaches trying to get everything working, I'm in a really bad mood. And then one of the first things I do once I'm back in the game is a misclick. And it's like the misclick wasn't even a big deal, it didn't disrupt us in any way. It's just one more little annoyance gnawing at my sanity as I try to complete this garbage run. And all of these annoyances are bothering me more and more, and when I get frustrated, I make mistakes, I make bad plays. And you betcha, you are about to see some bad plays. So we make it back to the strategic layer and we have 0 supplies. 0. Not a single one. So I sell a bunch of stuff that I normally wouldn't, like alloys for example. Yeah, I've learned nothing from my previous error. We're just so desperate, I figure I don't have much choice. I really want to build a radio tower so we can keep expanding to new regions. That's what we need to increase our income. And all my misery culminates in this supply raid. Before the mission even starts, I bond Roble and Quiet. I figure we need every advantage we can get. I'm trying to utilize every tool we have. I'm trying to play like I did in the Sharpshooters run. Because honestly, this campaign is going almost as badly as that one did. And let's see how the game rewards me. We have 2 pods and a turret all standing right on top of each other. Now this isn't too terrible since we can use a rocket to hit a whole bunch of enemies at once, but after the fighting starts, I send Kaiser down not very far. In fact, you can see how far I move him right here. But of course, by doing this, there's a 3rd pod that activates. And the reason I moved Kaiser down to where I did was so that he could get a flank shot on the codex that's below us. It's a 96% shot, and this absolute specimen manages to miss. So we activated that 3rd pod for nothing. We survive the enemy attack, and on the next turn I move Roble again to get a flanking shot, and again you can see how far I move him. It's not a huge distance, but it is enough to activate the fourth pod that's standing extremely close to the other three, and this one has a sector pod in it. And this is where I just lost it. I was blinded with rage. Like, if you're going to dump every pod so close together, why do we even have a pod system? Man, I was annoyed. Not to mention that on its turn, the sector pod uses Wrath Cannon. Now, I've talked about this ability in a recent video, and it is honestly garbage. The hitbox doesn't seem to align with where the lasers are pointing at all. And the problem this creates is that I have zero clue how to avoid getting hit by this on the next turn, since it can seemingly hit pretty much anywhere. It's an attack for which I have no defense. So with the bad RNG on top of all the technical problems I was having setting up the stream, I'm just furious at this point in time. And in my anger, I do something monumentally stupid for the second time in this run. I decide to evac, but that's not the silly thing. That was actually a smart idea. No, the mistake is that I run the Overwatch to the evac with Roble. Now this guy had already taken a hit, and literally all I needed to do was run the Overwatch with a full HP soldier. Preferably Kaiser. He could have tanked the hit, and even if he didn't through some monumentally bad luck, he's only a squaddie, and he can't even make a 96% shot, so it's not like it would be a big loss either way. But no, instead of doing that, I try making the dash with a guy at half health. Now naturally, he gets hit, and he's sent to the Shadow Realm. And this is exactly what I did to lose Coffee. Not only am I making terrible plays, I'm making them repeatedly. I'm not even learning from my mistakes. I need to be playing better here. But it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. Remember how I said I bonded Roble with Quiet? Well, guess what our boneheaded bondmate does? He goes berserk and panics. Now that means that he cannot evac out this turn. So once again, we're stuck. And this is why I often skip bonds. They can be just as much a curse as a blessing. Literally the very first mission I bonded these two guys, it has come back to bite me. So the bond between Mr. and Mrs. Claus saved our bacon earlier, but this one has had the exact opposite effect. So bonds do have their downsides. But whatever, we're evacing with everyone we can. Quiet's gonna have to fend for himself. And I'm actually glad when he gets mind controlled. This way he at least survives, and we may have a chance to rescue him later on. So being mind controlled is definitely better than being murked. But we're not done yet. Things are going to get even better. That mission that we just did took place in the region where I had just built the radio relay. So those 150 supplies that we just spent that we couldn't really afford to spend, well, it was for absolutely nothing. The region is lost, the tower is gone, and we'll have to build a new one there at some point. So it's just one more kick in the guts from this accursed run. And to be honest, I was pretty much emotionally checked out at this point. Chat were trying to help me out by offering some suggestions, like buying another set of blue screen rounds if we can afford them, but I don't do it. And my thinking is that whoever I give the blue screen rounds to, they're either gonna miss or get shadow realmed anyway, so what's the point? Complete nihilism had set in, and I was deploying on every mission expecting it to be another disaster. Sure enough, the next outing gives me more of what I'm expecting. Remember that concussion rocket ability I mentioned earlier, and how I assumed the smoke is left where the rocket launches, not where it lands? Because if the smoke appeared where it lands, that would be a mind-numbingly terrible idea. Well, you guessed it, the smoke appears where the rocket lands. And I have no words for this. Just why? Now, I'm not actually sure if enemies also get a bonus defense from being in smoke. If they do, this ability is pretty much the worst thing ever. It actively gives the opponents a buff. But even if Advent units don't benefit from smoke, it still sucks. What are you gonna do? Charge into the enemy to get the smoke bonus, and while you do that, you're probably gonna activate the other 2 pods that are just beyond line of sight? Plus, the defense bonus from the smoke is only gonna result in your soldiers getting 1-shot crit anyway. So this is honestly horrible. And apparently the concussion rocket doesn't work this way in Long War 2 proper. There just isn't a smoke cloud at all. That seems like a far better way to do it. But the question is, why do we even have this abysmal ability in the first place? Especially when it's going up against Shredder. And the reason is because I was so salty after that supply raid, I wasn't paying attention and I just clicked on Concussion Rocket without thinking on Kelly. A huge mistake, and I'm definitely going to retrain her after this outing, assuming she's still alive. The strat that I've actually gone with, apart from Kelly, has just been to give everyone Shredder at this level. Now, it might be a bit overkill putting this ability on every single unit, but the thing is, I only stream once a week, and during the week I have a lot of other stuff going on, so I often forget what's happening in the run between streams, hence the Roble and Coffee repeat situation. And so by giving everyone Shred, I don't have to worry about remembering who has it and who doesn't. It's a level of micromanagement that I can just avoid. And generally, when I'm playing this game, I want to avoid as much of that micromanagement as I can. Anyway, what I haven't mentioned here is that we're fighting a Gatekeeper, and Kaiser is a Corporal. We've racked up so many losses, we're fighting a Gatekeeper with a Corporal. I must have done something to get on Santa's naughty list this year. Now, we do actually win that mission, which is a nice surprise, but the bad times aren't over just yet. We are able to finally get a decent amount of supplies, and I'm wanting to build some tier 3 weapons. Problem is, we have no Elerium crystals. Once again, losing that supply raid is coming back to bite us. So I decide we'll buy some from the black market. Except about 1 minute before I leave to buy stuff from the market, the Alien Cypher Dark event has actually activated. This doubles the intel costs of, well, everything. So now we don't have enough intel to afford the crystals. If I had been a little bit quicker, we would have been fine. Now I've missed out. And seriously, words cannot describe how annoying this is. It really is feeling like the Sharpshooter campaign, where the game has become self-aware and it's deliberately implementing strats that it knows is going to block whatever I'm trying to do. Just really, really bad luck this run. But you know what? All of this stuff going wrong, dear viewer, it actually gives us an interesting opportunity. An opportunity to have a glimpse into your very soul. Because at this point, I imagine most people are going to have one of 2 reactions. If you're like me, you're wondering, what crippling setback are we going to experience next? If, however, you're perhaps a more optimistic person, you might be thinking that surely things have to get better, right? Surely we've reached the bottom of the barrel and it can only be uphill from here. And maybe, just maybe, you, my dear optimist, might be right. See, a few things start to go in our favour at this stage. The first is the man himself, Santa. He's reached Colonel level from a Covert op. Our abilities are Salvo, which is the same as Vanilla, Tactical Sense, which gives us +3 defense for every enemy we can see up to a maximum of 15, and finally there's Quick Burn. We can activate this ability to make the next use of the flamethrower a free action, so it potentially allows us to attack twice in 1 turn, which I guess is the same thing Salvo does. But on top of that, even if we can't build better weapons due to the crystal shortage, there is something we can build. Mimic beacons. 2 of them, in fact. The Alien Infiltrator Dark event has actually activated twice on this run. Now, I don't think I've seen that before, but it's a good thing for us here. It means we've got plenty of faceless corpses. So I could have built these mimic beacons earlier, we just didn't have the supplies. Now that we do, we've gone from 1 beacon to 3. And I think that's going to make a big difference. The final thing going our way is that we have a chance to rescue Quiet. If we can get him back, Death from Above may give us the power boost we need. So far, no one else has picked it up. Now, unfortunately, to get Quiet back, we're gonna need to go through the Warlock, and he's leveled up a bit since we last saw him. Yeah, our rockets are gonna be pretty much useless against him now. That's obviously quite the setback, so let's see how we go. We can only do our best. Now we're once again fielding a squaddy, but this guy actually makes a 46% shot to finish off an Archon, so that's pretty incredible. And honestly, I think it's his name that gives him his power. Trash. With a name like that, this guy is most definitely in his element in this godforsaken run. This entire campaign has been almost nothing but trash. So welcome to the team, new guy. And we get some more good luck with the Warlock as well. We actually reached the evac without encountering him. He did drop some zombies on us along the way, but we were able to make short work of them. Now there is a pod on top of the evac zone, and for a second I consider fighting them, then I realise I'm just being an idiot again. We can just run straight past these jokers and evac everyone to safety. Now sure, we could fight them and get some XP, but if we do that and stick around for another turn, we'd risk running into the Warlock, so I think if we've got a safe way out of here, that's what we're gonna do. So our best soldier is back in the fold, and that was the first outing in a while that went really well. We dominated on the battlefield there. So perhaps we are still in with a chance. And even better, another Covert Op soon levels Santa to Brigadier. We have Bunker Buster, which fires a special rocket that destroys environmental objects. I hope it's better than the other special rocket, the concussion one. Then we've got Rapid Fire, which I think is more or less the same as Vanilla. And finally, there's Firestorm. Now, I expected this ability to suck, but I give it to Santa so that we can test it out. Maybe I'll be wrong. Now, it provides fire immunity to the soldier, but it also does something else. And I think this one is more of a show than a tell. So just keep this ability in mind as we proceed. We'll come back to it a little later. Then we get some jank that actually benefits us. There's a council drop, and afterwards the black market's prices seem to have reverted to normal. Alien Cypher isn't doubling them anymore. Now the dark event is still active, so it should be doubling the prices. But whatever, I'm not looking a Christmas horse in the mouth. Wait, would a Christmas horse be a reindeer? Whatever. We buy the crystals because now we can afford them, and I upgrade our gauntlets and our shotguns both to level 3. I wanted to do the rifles as well, but we just didn't have enough crystals. And I'm back to being a smooth brain straight away here. After we upgrade the shotguns, we're then short of alloys to improve the gauntlets. So I end up having to buy some of those from the market too, because I sold too many. Again. Honestly, I'm getting annoyed at myself now. I really need to stop making the same mistakes repeatedly. Get your head in the game, Drifter. Anyway, with our new toys, we head to the Assassin Stronghold. I figure she should be an easy win with her explosive weakness. And fighting her in her chamber is usually easier than on a random map. So I'd rather fight her here than the black side. Now, as for the mission itself, well, we've got some fun times to be had. See, the Mark III Gauntlet automatically upgrades our rockets to blaster launchers. Now, they're not quite as good as a regular blaster launcher, they can still scatter, and I don't think they do quite as much damage. But they're still way better than rockets, and everyone on the team has one. Not to mention our flamethrowers are doing more damage as well. And we can demonstrate that with Santa's flamethrower here. His can affect robotic enemies, which is really good, but purifiers are still immune. Well, kind of. The Flamer Boy here doesn't take any damage from Santa, but Saint Nick's fire can cause enemies to panic, and the purifier does still panic. And in his panic, he throws a grenade at us. Even though our jolly friend is immune to fire, he does still take damage from the blast of the grenade. So it's a little bit annoying, but it was mostly just funny. I mean, one, the fact that this guy can panic from fire that he's immune to, And then on top of that, the fact that when he panics, he actually gets an extra attack and it works in his benefit. But it's no big deal, we can live with this. Then the elevator room is pretty weird. There's only 2 enemies in here. Normally this room is jam-packed with monstrosities wanting to end us. Maybe the game is feeling sorry for me after how badly I've been playing? I'm not sure. Anyway, let's just go and obliterate the assassin, shall we? And there's not too much to say as we engage her. The strat is just to bombard her with grenades and blaster bombs until she goes crying back to her safe space. And we wipe her out very quickly. We then turn our attention to the obelisk and hit it with as much firepower as we can. Now Mr. and Mrs. Claus's bond has reached level 3, so I use their dual strike action on it. I'd rather use explosives on the assassin herself, so we might as well use this one-off ability here. It'll allow us to do a bit more damage. Now the issue is, that is the only multi-attack that we have access to right now. So we're not able to destroy the tomb of the talky ones this turn. So we're going to do the normal thing of distracting the reinforcements with a mimic beacon, and eventually we can destroy it. The problem is that it takes another turn to do this, and so by the time we destroy the stupid thing, the assassin has 75% HP back rather than the usual 50%. And on top of that, she actually regains health when the meme beacon takes damage, so she ends up being on 100% health. Now I decide that's simply too much. We've used most of our blaster bombs and I don't think we're gonna be able to defeat her in a single turn. With that in mind, I decide we need to deal with the lesser enemies. We need to take them out so they can't attack us. Now before I do that, we do set Lady Forehead on fire. The Chosen are susceptible to fire, and I believe it shuts down quite a few of their abilities, like summoning reinforcements as an example. So with that done, it's time to deal with the rest of the scum. Now Metler and Kelly both make big damage rolls to finish off the Spectre that had cloned Christmas. The Soldier Christmas, I mean. Like that's his name. And Santa can disable the Berserker with a Frost Bomb. I should be making a cultural reference about ice and fire here, shouldn't I? Or is it a song of excuses and empty promises these days? I can never tell. Anyway, on her turn, the assassin makes a katana attack on Mrs. Claus. Now I expected this and I figured it was better than something like a harbour wave which could disable multiple soldiers. A katana attack is only going to disable one. Now on our turn, the problem is Mrs. Claus is one of the few people left who still has a use of her blaster launcher. But Santa can come to the aid. He can use their bond to recover her from any mental impairments. And now that she's no longer dazed or disoriented, she's free to use her blaster launcher. So once again, the bond is coming in useful. Ups and downs with these things. Christmas also still has a launcher, so he can use that, and these blaster bombs are doing an absurd amount of damage. This explosive weakness is just too good. Then one final flamethrower can seal the deal, and we are done with the assassin for good. I'm starting to feel better already. Maybe things are turning around. Now back on the strategic layer, the research has gotten a bit out of hand. I'm just researching a bunch of useless autopsies to avoid having to engage with the research that uses up Elerium crystals. We still don't have a lot of crystals and I want to keep as many as we can. We are hoarding these things like they're toilet paper in the year 2020. Alright, another supply raid. Can we win this one? If we can, it might finally solve our Elerium crystal shortage. Now this is a loot crate mission and the lost are present. The last couple of missions before this I haven't included in the video just because it's getting long already and we've still got a ways to go. But those missions have gone pretty well. Even when the game threw multiple pods at us at the same time, we were able to hold our own. And one thing that's really helping us is that we picked up the resistance order for faster will recovery. So that's allowing us to deploy Santa on most missions. Being the Brigadier, he is really saving our hides. Like here, for example, there's a heap of Lost and some Advent soldiers. And do you remember that Firestorm ability that I gave our boy? I think it's time I finally demonstrate it.
Toasty! Multiple hostiles eliminated.
Yeah, he turns the entire area into a scorched hellscape. I mean, just look at the environment here. It is absolute devastation. And as he douses the entire area in flames, remember that every enemy he hits that survives also has a chance to panic. So not only is this captain getting literally cooked, he fires at his own ally in the process and takes him out. Now, when I unlocked this ability, I assumed the AoE would be pitifully small and you'd just be lucky to hit at most 2 enemies at once. But I was wrong. The AoE is enormous, and it's just so brutal, lighting the entire area on fire. I love this ability. Now, because Santa is so powerful, I rush out to get some loot crates faster than I probably should. And it's not arrogance on my part that's causing me to do this, it's actually desperation. It is so unusual to be struggling for Elerium crystals this late in the game. So I'm really eager to get as many of those crates with resources as possible before Advent snatches them away from us. This leads to Santa being isolated and activating a Gatekeeper, Heavy Mech, and Shield Bearer, and no one is close enough to help him out with a Mimic Beacon. Now, getting Santa killed would not only be a terrible thing to do for a Christmas special video, but it would also deprive us of one of our most powerful soldiers. Our boy has really been carrying the run on his shoulders for the last handful of missions, so I really want to keep him safe. How can I do it? Well, I do have a plan. It's not ideal, it's a little bit crazy, but I have done it before. I just start throwing down blaster bombs and grenades to summon in more Lost. As many Lost as I can. We want to use these things as dollar store mimic beacons, taking the heat off of St. Nick. And the plan does indeed work. The Gatekeeper turns its attention towards the Lost Horde and, well, I'll just show you how it goes. Now look, I will admit, that's a lot of zombies. But I'm honestly happy with this because it has kept Santa from taking any damage. We just now have a legion of undead that we need to deal with. It's December, not October. This is not what I want to be happening here. But check this out. We throw the frost bomb at the Gatekeeper, now partly to stop it annihilating us on the next turn, but also because it actually breaks the control this thing has over the zombies. Now, I wasn't sure this was going to happen when we used the frost bomb, but Twitch chat and I figured it was worth a try. And so just as quickly as all those zombies were brought up, they get sent right back to the hell that they came from. Kind of a blink and you miss 'em type of deal. And I guess now is as good a time as any to mention that even though Santa's flames will affect mechanical enemies, such as the mech, units that are part robotic and part organic, like codexes and gatekeepers, they're still immune. So if you're not sure what enemies your flame is going to affect or not, if you can use Haywire Protocol on the enemy, then it will be affected by the phosphorus ability. If you can't use Haywire Protocol on it, it's not robotic and your flame is probably not going to work. Unless it's a regular organic enemy, but you get what I mean. Now once the rest of the team is by Santa's side, we can use Mimic Beacons as we need to keep ourselves safe, and we do end up winning this battle. But even in victory, the game still manages to get in one little jab as it loses. See, we have 2 Advent-marked crates. They're too far away for us to reach and grab for ourselves, so I decide we're just going to have to murk every remaining enemy this turn. That way the mission will end, and we'll still get those crates. But after I think I've eliminated the last guy, the mission doesn't stop. No, it turns out there's one Lost in the very corner of the map who goes down to fire damage in just enough time to let Advent grab those 2 extra crates. This stupid Lost delayed the end of the mission by 1 turn. That's all it took for us to lose those resources. Now, it's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but it is enough to irritate me all the same. Just another tiny paper cut picking away at my soul. After this one, the momentum continues swinging in our favour, this time in a big way. We have the resistance order for instant suit construction in the Proving Grounds. I equip Quiet with a Wraith suit as the grappling hook combines nicely with Death from Above. Meanwhile, on our boy Christmas, I equip a War suit. And these work a bit differently on the technical class than they do on other soldiers. See, there's no heavy weapon slot. Instead, the War suit gives a bonus use of both our blaster bomb and flamethrower. So it's now 2 blaster bombs and 3 flamethrowers per mission. And this is crazy. Once we have enough Elerium crystals, assuming we ever get enough, we can equip everyone we want in a War suit, and they'll all be getting extra blaster bombs and flamethrowers. Normally in these runs, we do the final mission of the game with 2 blaster launchers when possible, and it's normally pretty hard to get to. Here we're looking at a maximum of 12. Now again, they're not quite as good as the regular ones, but having 6 times as many as I normally would, plus a bunch of flamethrower uses, that is more than a worthwhile trade. I think things are about to get a bit crazy in here. But before we can have fun blowing Advent to smithereens, we have an important matter of business to attend to. We finally scored a covert op to rescue Leeson. Dude has been missing for months. We need to get our boy back. As we head out to save Leeson, it's actually the start of the 4th stream. So I've had a week away from the game to chill out. Let's see if that helps me make better plays. Things start off well as we're able to grab our boy and evac without any issue. The mission does spawn an evac zone, but we can actually ignore that one and throw down our own at a closer location. It only takes 1 mimic beacon to buy us an extra turn, and we can make it out with everyone intact. So Leeson is officially back and ready for duty. And this part is pretty funny. On the very next mission, the Warlock mind controls our boy Christmas, and in his mind controlled state, he instantly one-shots Leeson. Now thankfully the legend is only in bleed out, and I did bring a medikit, so we'll be able to stabilize him. If we had waited all that time to get Leeson back, only for him to drop dead on the very next mission, well, I would have been a salty individual. More salty than I already am, I mean. And the big problem when we face the Warlock is his immunity to explosives. I'm rocking the whole team in war suits here, but the blaster bombs don't affect him. Plus, if we miss a shot, he has kinetic plating. So our best bet to damage him are our flamethrowers, and they require us to get in really
close range.
Now, given the Warlock can jump up the side of buildings and we can't, well, getting in close isn't that easy. So it takes us quite a while, but thankfully no one else goes down and we are able to eventually defeat him. After this encounter, I decide we really should get around to hitting the black site. It's October in-game and we still haven't done it. Now the barracks is a bit tired, so I opt to deploy only 5 soldiers. Now one of them is Santa, who's a beast, and this mission is meant to be done in the early game, so I think 5 soldiers should be fine in this instance. Now things start off a bit interesting. There's actually a pod on the roof. That doesn't happen too often. Now I want to save the blaster bomb, so this pod ends up taking 2 turns to deal with. I'm not worried about the Spectre since it's just going to create a clone, so as long as we can murk the Lancer on the first turn, which we can, we then have a whole turn to deal with the Spectre. And there's no time limit on this mission, so I figure it's better to take 2 turns dealing with these clowns, rather than wasting blaster bombs, which we may end up needing later. And something I learn here with the next pod relates to Quick Burn and Firestorm. Activating the Quick Burn ability actually makes Firestorm a free action. This is ridiculously OP. I love it. We push forward through pod after pod, and nothing really stands up to us. And I guess that's the benefit of doing this mission when you've got a Brigadier on your squad. I honestly don't have much else to say. We win really easily, and it feels good to say that. So next up is the Warlock's base. I'm wanting to make some story progress fast here, seeing as we finally appear to be in a position where we can win missions without it being a Herculean task. The war suits and extra heavy weapon uses are really making a big difference. Now, as we assault the base, there seems to be some shenanigans going on. A pod spots us through one of the airships, and it's a bad situation. The ship is blocking line of sight for us, and it's hard to get off any attacks. Plus, the heavy mech has gone on Overwatch. So I launch a blaster bomb with Polar, and it scatters a bit, of course it does, but it's just really weird. Like, look at the environment around the enemies. The cover has been destroyed, the floor around them is littered with debris, and yet the enemies themselves appear to be completely untouched. How is that even possible? This seems like jank to me. And the worst part is that because we haven't done any damage, the mech is still overwatching. Now, Plot Armor does have the Lightning Reflexes ability, but sadly I didn't bring him on this mission. He wasn't available. So instead, it's gonna be up to the lowest level soldier to risk taking a hit. They're the most disposable, after all. So Metla, you're up, buddy. Good luck. And sure enough, he actually survives, because he didn't actually enter the mech's line of sight. Yeah, I didn't check for that. I just assumed that he would. I guess I'm still playing as badly on this stream after all. The problem with the Overwatch is that in order to move up and get the best available positioning, we're gonna have to risk taking a hit. Or perhaps not. Very fortunately, Mrs. Claus can move up and just avoid the mech's fire by a single tile. She then uses her blaster launcher and the stupid Overwatch is finally gone. And while that's good, it's taken 3 soldiers' actions to do it. That's half our team and we haven't eliminated a single enemy. So what's the solution? It's a pretty simple one, and one you might expect. We just drop even more blaster bombs. We drop as many blaster bombs as it takes. Now the Archon does survive, but we distract it with a Mimic Beacon, or at least that's the plan. It ends up running away instead. Now when we eventually find it and the new pod that it's teamed up with, I send Polar in to eliminate the thing. It's only got 2 HP left. She can do this. Or maybe she can't because she misses her 98% point blank attack. It seems Polar is not going to be as useful this run as she was in the previous. And even though we destroy the Archon, the Advent lackeys survive, and we end up having to use our second Mimic Beacon. So we're only going to have 1 left for the final chamber. Hopefully that's all we'll need. Now the elevator room is full of high HP enemies, so we just run right past them and head to the area below. And now that I think about it, does the game actually tell us the elevator goes down instead of up? Or did I just assume that? Whatever. In the Warlock's chamber, Polar lands a 37% shot. Yeah, she misses the 89, but she can land this one. That's XCOM for you, I guess. Now when the Warlock arrives, I look to drop a blaster bomb on him. It won't damage his HP, but it will shred and destroy his cover. Now unfortunately, even though I think I've got him in more or less the center of the circle, the missile scatters in the perfect direction to avoid damaging him or his cover whatsoever. Like seriously, there was only one way it could have scattered to have that happen, and that's the direction it scattered. Man, this scatter is a dreadful mechanic. So then we have to use a second bomb to destroy his armor and cover. Once that's done, we just start shooting, and we're able to take massive amounts of HP away from him. At which point, it's time for me to make another horrible misplay. I decide I'll try and finish him with Overwatch. By finishing him on his turn, that will give us a whole extra turn before any reinforcements arrive. But I forget that summoning enemies doesn't trigger Overwatch. It does trigger Blade Storm, but not a regular Overwatch shot. So long story short, we could have easily defeated this guy on our turn, but instead of being defeated, he summoned in 6 extra enemies that we now have to deal with. Yeah, just another completely stupid mistake from me. So I used Santa's flamethrower only to discover the spectral lancers are actually immune to fire. I didn't know that, so I've learned something with this run. Now my basic plan is to soften the enemies up with the squad, which will then allow Quiet to finish them off with death from above. The thing is, we're wielding a lot of shotguns, and we actually make 2 big crits one-shotting a couple of the bad guys. No death from above required here. A single spectral does survive, and it even dazes Santa, but this is actually okay. We easily one-shot the scumbag on our turn, and with one more action we can take down the Warlock. And we can even use death from above to do it, which will cause that action to be refunded. And we want as many actions as we can get as we set our sights on the timeout coffin. And I'm not entirely sure how this happened, but we actually managed to destroy this thing in a single turn. Now we did pick up the breakthrough for +1 damage to plasma weapons, so that's definitely helping. And I did use dual strike with the clauses yet again. And yeah, all of this coming together, somehow we blow it to pieces all at once. And the really cool thing about this is that when the Warlock returns, he has a pitiful 25% HP. Yeah, a whopping 13 hit points. It's certainly less impressive than the Assassin. And you know how this one's gonna go. Old Skullet Man doesn't stand a chance. We take care of him pretty easily. And I'm feeling optimistic about how well this went. The Warlock's explosion immunity makes him the most dangerous of the 3 chosen in this run, and he was absolutely not dangerous here. So this bodes well for us. If we can handle him, in theory we can handle anything. Now the next guerrilla op, I actually send Leeson as a one-man army. And by one-man army, I mean a guy who instantly evacs on the very first turn of the mission. The Dark event isn't too bad, we lose the black market for 6 weeks, and my thinking here is that by avoiding this mission, we can prevent our soldiers from becoming tired. That's going to allow us to then take on another story mission really quickly, such as the Hunter's Base, for example. Now, we have encountered the Edgelord on a single previous mission. He put up a respectable fight, but we were able to defeat him. He does have quite a few abilities, though, that we're going to need to pay attention to. Low profile and revenge are always a nasty combo, but honestly, even more annoying than that is Planewalker. That's always a pain to deal with. Now, his weakness is Groundling, and that's probably not going to be that helpful to us. So the first thing we want to do is throw a Frost Bomb at him. That's going to shut down his ability to teleport. Once we've done that, we then want to run in and just get as many flanking shots as we can, hit this guy with as much damage as possible. And I have learned my lesson from the Warlock. I don't galaxy brain myself with an Overwatch or anything like that. We have the shot, we can finish him off right here and now, so I take the shot. No nonsense this time, let's just get the job done. Now the reinforcements are honestly fine, a Chrysalid and a Priest. I'm not too worried about those, so we're going to focus on the mast and try to destroy it as quickly as we can. And Santa actually ends up firing at it 3 times. Once with dual strike, then once again with a regular shot, and on that regular shot his hair trigger procs, so then he can make a 3rd attack. Our man is putting in the work here. So all these shots, not to mention the rest of the squad, allow us to easily annihilate the drywall in a single turn. We're doing really well with taking this thing out. We even murk the Chrysalid as well, and the Priest is easily distracted by the pretty lights of the meme beacon. So the Hunter returns with 50% HP. The only problem is, this time we don't have a Frost Bomb, so there's no counter to Planewalker. Now, he's actually not too annoying with it though. For some reason, he keeps teleporting towards our troops rather than away from them. Now, truth be told, with blaster bombs, it probably wouldn't have mattered too much where he teleported to. We probably would have been able to hit him either way. But still, it's a really interesting choice. He made this as easy for us as he possibly could. So, thanks, I guess. And yeah, no more Chosen. So let's go hit those remaining story missions. Before that though, I have to share something that happened on this retaliation. We've got a couple of Archons active, and there's also a Gatekeeper right behind them, just out of our line of sight. So my thinking is, if we can hit the Archons with a blaster bomb, we can reduce their HP, then Quiet should be able to finish them off with death from above. The issue with this plan is that it involves blowing up this nearby mobile home. There's one civilian on the roof and another one hiding inside. Now, if these guys were Advent collaborators, I'd turn them to ash with a smile on my face in an instant. But Resistance personnel, well, they're our people. We should be keeping them safe. I mean, it's literally the reason we're here. On the other hand, if sacrificing one or two of them will allow us to eliminate these Archons, well, maybe it's a price worth paying. You know, the greater good and all that. So I decide we're just going to do it. And I think I'll just show you past Drifter's response to this. We may have to sacrifice that civilian there. So sorry, buddy. Hope you survive the fall damage, but you probably won't. Hey. Oh, it was a faceless. We blew up the faceless. Oh, that was literally a Commander, how did you know it was a faceless? It was a faceless? So yeah, this went absolutely perfectly. The actual civilian survived the fall damage, and the one civilian that we did blow up just happened to be a faceless. I could not have planned this better if I tried. Just a thing of beauty here. And it's moments like these that keep bringing me back to this game, even after all the nonsense that it's given me. So we do win that mission, and afterwards we have a round of guerrilla ops. Now I'm about to take on the remaining story missions, like I said, so my plan is to use the Leeson evac strategy once again. Now by doing this, the dark event will obviously trigger straight away, but I'm honestly fine with that since it's Alien Infiltrator. And I think that makes a third time we've procced this particular dark event in a single campaign. Now surely that's got to be a record, right? Anyway, enough stalling, time for the story missions. We're doing the Forge first because it's generally easier. And I don't really have much to say about it. I mean, we've taken down a Chosen with explosive immunity. What exactly is a regular sectopod gonna do to us? I'll tell you what it's gonna do. It's gonna stand there uselessly while we turn it into scrap metal. By this point, we have enough warsuits that everyone minus Quiet is wearing one, so they're all sporting 2 blaster bombs, 3 flamethrowers, plus this mission has no time limit, so we can move slow and steady, engaging the pods at our own pace. There's really nothing Advent can do to stand up to us. So, we win. Easily. That was worth the wait, wasn't it? All that hype I gave the story missions. And I know I haven't been as detailed with the strats as I normally would be with some of these missions, but it's just that there's honestly not that much strategy to talk about. It's just blow stuff up with rockets or set it on fire with flamers. So maybe the Psionic Gate mission will prove more interesting. Let's find out. Our strat to deal with the buried chrysalids is just to use Santa. His HP is very high thanks to all the covert ops he's completed, plus we equip him with a medikit so he's going to be immune to the chrysalid poison. The mission does go a bit sideways pretty quickly though, as a pod patrols up into us from a lower area where we couldn't see them. So our concealment is gone before I'm ready, and we have both the pod that flanked us and the one that I was preparing to ambush. So it might sound bad, right? 2 pods active at once. It's a fair few enemies, but it honestly doesn't matter. We just pulverize all of them. Like, Santa can use a free action to ignite one of the Advent goons on fire who panics, and then Santa just lands a giant crit to one-shot the other goon. So it's pretty much a slaughter. Now our boy does take some damage from the first hidden chrysalid, This is expected, and I'm not too worried about it. However, I do start to worry after another 2 of the oversized bugs hit him. One of them even crits. So our boy is down to 11 HP. Now that's not horrible, especially since he does still have his armor points, but I am getting a little bit concerned. I would absolutely hate to have a Christmas video where we kill Santa Claus. And what's really bad here is that there's actually another pod of 3 non-hidden chrysalids who have activated, and they're coming for St. Nicholas. So even though Santa could unleash some devastation with Firestorm, I decide we need to spend his last action using the Medikit. He needs to recover some health. So that means the rest of the team needs to back up Kris Kringle. And they are more than up to the task. Christmas launches a blaster bomb that inflicts good damage and softens them up. From there, Quiet can go ham with Death from Above. He destroys everything. So this leaves Santa free to heal himself up. That's exactly what we want. Once the Gatekeeper activates, the first thing we want to do is shoot with Christmas. He's picked up holo targeting as a hidden skill, so he can give the rest of the crew an aim buff. And this allows Trash to pick up the elimination pretty easily. Now after this, Santa does take another hit from a chrysalid. We are able to heal him up a second time. I've also given Metla a second medikit for this exact scenario. So Santa's gonna be just fine, but I am worried about how long he's gonna be injured for after this mission. He's taken a lot of damage. But it turns out I'm worrying for nothing. Despite losing over half his HP during the conflict, he's only out for 6 days. And we can make that even less if we scan Templar HQ. So really not a big deal here at all. This deployment was more difficult than the Forge mission, but that's not really saying much. It still wasn't too bad. With these missions done, we're quickly about to complete the story research. Now, I get a glimpse of the Hunter UFO tracking us, and I'm expecting the base defense to trigger any second. But it doesn't. We actually unlock the network tower without the base defense having activated. And this is historic. I've got about 2,000 hours playtime in this game, and I've never finished a campaign without having to do the base defense. I didn't think it was possible. I thought that once you hit a certain point in the game, that mission would trigger no matter what. But here we have a chance to make history, at least for me. The Hunter UFO is still out there, it is trying to find us, so we don't want to waste any time. We're finishing this campaign here and now. We are going to avoid the base defense completely. So yeah, first time ever, we're going to the network tower without having played the base defense. Now that's really cool. The trade-off is that we're taking on these final missions before I normally would. We don't have enough Brigadiers for both the final mission and the tower. So on the network tower, we're deploying Kelly the Brigadier, Polar the Colonel, and Trash the Major. We also don't have enough intel for all the available upgrades. We're only going to be able to choose one. So I opt for squad targeting. That gives us both an aim and a crit bonus. I think that's the best of what we have available. And as we deploy, the main strat is just to take things slow and Overwatch creep. I've also given everyone I can the salvo ability. Being able to launch a blaster bomb and then follow up with a second attack is really going to help maximize our damage output. In the first pod, we just annihilate. Kelly single-handedly murks an Archon with rapid fire, then Polar hits a ridiculous crit to one-shot the Andromedon's second form. It's just awesome. And as for the second pod, well, the Archon takes up position next to an explosive container. So we drop a blaster bomb on it for double explosive damage. And after doing that, Polar can still make a second attack thanks to salvo. So she just shoots it to finish the flying boy off. And this trend continues for the entire mission. We find the pods and then we just obliterate them. Having a couple of non-brigadiers proves to be no handicap whatsoever. These guys completely stomped Advent, and I am genuinely impressed. I thought this mission was going to be much more difficult than it was. Hats off to these guys. And not only was I expecting the network tower to be difficult, I'm actually expecting it to be the more difficult of the two final missions. See, for the final battle, we have a team of 6 brigadiers, so I'm thinking this is going to be a beatdown. In addition to Salvo, I've also given everyone on this squad the Javelin Rockets ability. I'm thinking in the final chamber, with the avatars teleporting, it may be useful to have a longer range on our blaster launchers. And the default range of our technicals is definitely less than what a regular blaster bomb is. So as we deploy, the main problem we're going to have is that our gauntlets are limited use abilities. So once a soldier burns through all their bombs and flamers, they're not going to be getting any more. So we want to ration these things as much as we can. To help with this, I've also given rapid fire to most of the squad. That gives them an option to do big damage, and there's no limit to the number of times we can use that ability. We just have to wait for it to come off cooldown. Now the first pod is a bunch of mutons. We use one rocket to destroy their cover, and then we want to eliminate them with guns from there on out. We could spam rockets, and that would make things really easy in the short term, but once we run out of them, it could prove fatal in the long term. So regular shots are the better approach when we can. And for this first pod, they're very easy to deal with, especially when Santa's hair trigger procs and he gets 2 shots. So you combine that with his stock doing 4 damage even on a miss, and he is putting in really good work once again. Now Nightmare has scored Phantom as a hidden ability, so I'm using her to scout, and the plan is pretty much the same as the Specialists video. Place our squad on the very edge of the enemy's line of sight, and then trigger the Overwatch ambush when they patrol into us. The problem is that these guys aren't Specialists, and they are not nearly as good at overwatching. So only 1 of our 5 Overwatchers even takes a shot. So the rest of them don't even miss, they just stand there and do nothing. I guess they didn't have line of sight. Seems like they should have, but whatever. And as if that's not garbage enough, the Gatekeeper gets to randomly shoot at us. Now it does miss, so no harm done, but this entire exchange was just really obnoxious. So if that wall is going to break our line of sight, well that's fine. We'll just remove the wall, no worries. But our trouble continues as Quiet isn't able to grapple anywhere that will give him line of sight on the bad guys. Apparently he cannot see them through this massive gaping hole that we just created. And that's an issue since it means we can't use death from above. So Plot Armor takes aim at one of the Andromedons and he leaves it on 1 HP. If only we'd have scored a single point of damage more. And then finally we get some good luck as Christmas manages to hit the Gatekeeper. So not only has it taken damage, it's also holo-targeted. And even better, his hair trigger activates too, so we get another shot. With this one, I opt to hit the Andromedon still in cover. Now, Christmas does miss with the attack, but it still applies holo-targeting, so I'm happy with that. Mrs. Claus finishes the Gatekeeper, and then Quiet can use a rapid fire to take down the Andromedon in cover. Now, I really want to get the 1 HP boy to second form as well. And I decide the best way to do this is by breaking Nightmare's concealment and attacking with her. Now I'm not happy about having to do this, means we're not going to have any scouting capability for the rest of the mission, but we'll just have to do our best. And the reason we want second form is that unlike the first form, the shells aren't immune to Santa's flamethrower. So I move in to use Firestorm as a free action, but I'm 1 tile short from being able to hit both of them. Just fantastic. I figure 1 is better than none, so we cook one of the Andromedon husks, and Santa can then shoot at it to finish it off. The plan from there is to just hope that the second one misses when it tries to punch us. Or maybe we won't even have to do that. Santa's hair trigger activates again. That's literally both turns he's attacked this mission that Hair Trigger has procced. Now we do have the Continental bonus that improves weapon mods, but even with that, I think getting it twice like this is a 4% chance. Just crazy. So he can use rapid fire to annihilate the last Andromedon. And once again, I'm not entirely sure how we managed to pull this off, but the entire pod is gone. And we did it without taking any damage. We soon come across a pod of mechs. Now that's not terrible, but some of them are quite far away. And if we push up to them, we're not going to have very good cover. But I've got another trick up my sleeve. We've actually scored tactical analysis as a Continental bonus. So we take out the 2 closest mechs and then we just break line of sight with the remaining ones. On their turn, they're going to have no choice but to move up on us, and that will mean they have no action points left to attack. Now we do Overwatch them, but again, these guys aren't specialists, and I don't think we managed to eliminate a single enemy this way. That's not a huge problem though, because the mechs don't use cover. So we don't have to use any rockets, we can just start shooting, and we don't stop until there's no mechs left. So once again, this encounter has gone very well. Things are looking promising. The pod after this is also quite simple. Now I do use a blaster bomb to destroy the Andromedon's full cover, and it also takes out a big chunk of this weird nursery type of building with it. So if you're wondering why there's a massive hole in the structure, that's why. We also use a rocket on the 2 sector pods. It allows us to shred both of them for the price of one, so I figure it's worth it. And from there it's just a lot of rapid fires to finish them off. It only takes 3 soldiers to destroy both the big tin cans. That's a pretty impressive effort from our technicals here. Now there are a couple of heavy mechs left, but we're going to use the same tactical analysis trick on them. Just break line of sight so all they can do is move forward and they can't use any attacks. And once they do this, we're then going to descend upon them like vultures to roadkill or Diddy to a bottle of baby oil. Thanks to the Javelin ability, we can activate the final avatar from beyond line of sight with a blaster bomb. And this is really good since it's going to hit the entire pod of enemies before they have a chance to scatter. And I'm pretty sure when the avatar teleports, it has to move to a tile that XCOM has line of sight on. Now, given we've barely moved past the entranceway, this essentially forces it to drop right on top of us. At which point, Santa just obliterates it with a double crit rapid fire. Just brutal. I love to see it. So plot armor can then further weaken the Archons with his flamethrower, and that leaves them completely vulnerable to death from above. So a thorough trouncing here. We've taken complete control of this area. On the enemy turn, both pods of reinforcements drop on the same side of the map. Now in theory that sounds bad, but they're all sectoids. Yeah, 2 pods of sectoids. And with our current damage output, they are a guaranteed one-shot as long as we hit. And Quiet ends up downing 4 of them on his own, so really not much to worry about here. Of course, after that, the second avatar's gonna arrive, and he's got some heavy mechs with him, plus a pod of chrysalids drop in on the same side of the room. And we don't have a death from above user over here, so this could be bad. We don't even have plot armor with his lightning reflexes to help with the mech's Overwatch, so instead I run it with Santa since he's got the most HP. Now he does take a hit, but thankfully only 1, not 2, so he's still looking okay. And the reason that I want Santa here is he can cook the chrysalids with the last use of his flamethrower as a free action. After that, he can use his final blaster bomb on the mechs. That allows Christmas to eliminate one of them with a regular shot, and I've actually bonded him with plot armor, so he can gain another action, and that allows him to eliminate the second mech as well. Now, in retrospect, I probably should have attacked the mechs first with Christmas to remove their Overwatch, and then run Santa in after that. But at the time, I was trying to keep my options open. There's a lot of enemies. I wasn't entirely sure how we were going to take them all out, so running the Overwatch seemed like a worthwhile risk. Now, we're not going to be able to take down the Avatar this turn, we just don't have enough actions left. So Mrs. Claus is going to distract it with a meme beacon. On the empty side of the arena, we just move our troops into the middle of the 3 reinforcement gates. This way, regardless of whatever drops on top of them, they'll hopefully be able to move into a position where they can deal with the threat effectively. But here's the thing, nothing actually drops on them. Once again, both reinforcement pods enter on Santa's side of the map. That's 4 pods in a row now. And one of them is a group of 3 Andromedons. And as if all that's not bad enough, we get really unlucky with the Mimic Beacon too. The Avatar crits it and one-shots. Plus, Santa's Flamer didn't actually set the last chrysalid on fire, so it survives, and with no beacon to attack, it hits our bulky boy. So on our turn, things are looking dire. 8 enemies, 11 if you include the second form of each Andromedon, and we only have 3 troops to deal with them. It's kinda crazy how we were so dominant only a couple of turns ago, and now we are in a really tight spot. And it's just because we're getting horrible luck with these reinforcements. So I activate Firestorm with Christmas, and this is the great thing about fire immunity on our troops. Even though Santa's standing right next to him, we don't have to worry about taking any damage from Christmas's attack. That's an Advent exclusive concern in this particular scenario. So that's taken out 4 of the bad guys, that's a start. Santa can disable an Andromedon with his Frost Bomb, so that's another one that we don't have to worry about, at least for now. And honestly, I'm probably more worried about the Andromedons over the Avatar. The Psionic Boy should go for mind control, which, even though that's bad, it's not nearly as bad as something like an Acid Bomb. So we use Dual Strike on one of the Andromedons, but Santa misses his shot. Now that was a clutch moment, and it's really bad that he couldn't land it. We needed to get rid of this thing here. Now Mrs. Claus at least connects with her shot, and then she can give Santa a bonded action so the big man can make a 3rd attack this turn. On top of that, she can also finish the Andromedon's first form herself. But see, here I run into a problem. I want to use Rapid Fire with Santa to eliminate the shell, but the ability's still on cooldown. I briefly consider moving Santa out of line of sight, that might keep him safe. The thing is, if we do that, Mrs. Claus is still flanked, and the enemies are just going to turn their attention to her. Now, leaving his wife to get massacred by Andromedons doesn't really seem in character for Santa. So instead, we leave him to stand his ground. We take aim at the wreck, and all we can do is hope for a super high damage crit to one-shot it, which we don't get. So here comes the enemy turn. The 3rd Avatar has arrived, and now we have 2 of them active at the same time. That is not a good sign. Now the second one mind controls Christmas, and then it happens. The still fully functional Andromedon takes aim at Santa, and our boy goes down. Santa's leading the charge on this one. Oh, wow, okay. Y'all ain't playing? Like, we want line of sight on it without being too close to it. Wow, he just teleported through space. Cool. What? Man, okay, Santa's balked. None of his animations are working. That's a bit weird. Through the power of bonds. Yeah. She doesn't have to survive a turn. We can just bounce her out. Oh. Yes. Alright. And in his panic, he kills his own guy. Well, good work, Santa. Yeah, it does. It does! Oh my god! Oh, and then I think he's got a stock, so even if he misses... Well, he didn't miss, so it doesn't matter. And he got it. Okay. Santa's not playing. Miss! Oh, Santa! My brother! The legend himself, the man who was at one point carrying this run solely on his own shoulders. He has sacrificed his very life in order to save Christmas. A true hero until the bitter end. Now, unfortunately, the loss of her husband understandably upsets Mrs. Claus a little bit. And by upsetting her a little bit, I mean she goes berserk and starts firing at all the enemies, including the mind-controlled Christmas. She shreds all of his armor and leaves him on a pitiful 5 HP. So what on earth are we gonna do here? We have 2 avatars running around and we're down to 3 soldiers. Santa's gone, Christmas is mind-controlled, and Lady Claus is panicked. So it's looking bad, but plot armor has arrived from his side of the map to assist our struggling troops. Let's see if he can live up to his namesake and bring this run back from the brink. I start off with a quick burn firestorm combo on the avatar. I'm hoping if we can set it on fire that will disable its teleportation ability. Now I'm not sure if that's how it works or not, but I figure it's worth a try. If we can stop this thing from running away, it'll give plot armor a much better chance at taking it down. The problem is the avatar is actually standing on a tile with water on it, and I think the water will negate the chance to burn. And if you didn't know, yeah, if you've got a soldier on fire and you move them onto a tile with water, it will extinguish the flames. So anyway, long story short, the avatar is able to teleport away, and that's exactly what I didn't want to happen. But hope isn't lost just yet. Our boy Plot Armor still has 1 action left, and he's also got a blaster bomb, so he drops it right on top of the avatar. And this time I actually want it to teleport. I'm hoping that it'll move towards Quiet and Nightmare so they can take it down. But of course, once again, I don't get what I want. The avatar moves right back towards Plot Armor, and he's out of actions now. In fact, that entire side of the board is out of actions now. So this is looking like the end, right? There's nothing we can do to defeat this thing this turn. Well, that may not be true. We might actually still be okay if my plan comes together. So step 1, I'm going to focus on the 3rd avatar for just a moment, and we're going to drop a blaster bomb on it with Quiet. And once that's done, then it's back to the 2nd avatar. Are you keeping up with which avatar is which? I know I'm struggling. But anyway, what we can do is use Quiet's grappling hook to propel him right on top of the 2nd avatar. This gives him an easy 100% chance to hit, and finally that psionic prick goes down. Now this has 2 really important implications. One is that Christmas is now no longer mind-controlled. But 2, even better than that, Quiet still has an action point thanks to Death from Above. And since I bonded him with Nightmare just before this mission, he can give that refunded action to her. This allows Nightmare to yellow dash right up to the final avatar's face. We give her the 3rd action point, and she doesn't even need the 2nd hit of rapid fire. Just a straight up crit for 21 damage to send the final boss not only to the Shadow Realm, but also the bottom of the ocean. Farewell, you absolute filth. And so it's done. Santa's sacrifice was not in vain. We've beaten the game with only WotC Technicals. And my oh my, what a run. I wanted to do this as a Christmas video because I thought it would be a fun little gimmick run where we just stomp Advent with a bunch of explosives. But this was probably the hardest of the WotC classes after the sharpshooters. I wasn't ready for just how difficult this ended up being. Now, things definitely got much easier once we had access to warsuits, but certainly more hurdles in this one than I expected. Now, some people will probably say this class is bad, and others will say they're amazing and I just played with them badly. And honestly, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. The Technicals are a mediocre class, and I made a whole bunch of mistakes that only exacerbated their existing limitations. And it does make me chuckle a little bit. After I made such a big deal in the previous run about wanting to do the specialists justice and avoid silly mistakes, I kinda dropped the ball a few times here, didn't I? But hey, it is what it is, mistakes happen, and even though it was probably more difficult than it needed to be, we are victorious all the same. So we've beaten the game with all 8 Long War II classes. It's been a wild ride, but this series has finally come to a close. And with this run complete, that's probably the last video I'm going to post on the channel for the year. And what a year it's been. The channel's only continuing to get bigger, and I want to thank all of you for the ongoing support that you've given me. It means the world. I've got some big plans for videos I want to make in 2025, and I hope that you'll be there to join me for it. Until then, have a great day.